Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 476.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because here's the thing. When you are out there in business, you are out there doing your thing. You got your head down. You're making sure that your widgets and whatsits are doing what they need to do. They're being produced. Your customers are receiving their product. They're receiving their service, and you're making sure that everything is continuing to work. Why? Because you want to make sure that that stream of cash flow that you're building, that you're developing, works out. You're doing the same thing with your properties, making sure it all continues to go forward. And here's the thing. Because you could be in the business, you're not focused on what's happening around the business. What do I mean? What if the way of doing business and how to capture customers and increasing customer lifetime value, what if all of those things started changing, but you just weren't paying attention? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Not just you paying attention, but more importantly, what's next for your business. You've seen lots of other businesses change their strategy, and now it could be time for you to do the same. I have with me today none other than Ralph Welborn. He's the co-author of Topple, The End of the Firm-Based Strategy and Rise of New Models for Explosive Growth. Here's the thing. I know, like you know, the one thing you were trying to do is to continually grow. So what we've got today is that our guest ran strategy for IBM. Yes, that company. And has been a part of growing a company to 18,000 employees in 21 countries, which is insane. And now he invests his time over at CapImpact, making sure that businesses continue to grow, and he's wrote the book about it. So that means you and I are going to take lots of notes because we want to grow, and he's going to show us how. So help me welcome Ralph Welborn. Ralph, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks. And thanks for having me on.
I'm glad that you were able to make the time because in the land of growth, it's usually busy.
it is. It's moderately busy. Although, it's an interesting thing. It's a busy time, but it's a difficult time. And what I mean by that is I believe that there's some incredible shifts that are occurring. And look, we're all hearing about shifts in the marketplace and look out for this and look out for that. We've been hearing this for a long time. But if you actually look at the data right now, there are some things really are shifting right now that are different. So for example, there are only 12% of companies that are capturing 85% of economic profit in any industry. And those numbers are only concentrating. That's a difference that we haven't seen ever before, this level of concentration, which means that the majority of firms, you mentioned in the intro that what are you focused on? Everyone's focused on this. What do I do? What do I need to do? How do I keep growing? But that concentration rate is just getting tougher and tougher to work against. And there are fewer and fewer of the economic profit, the table scraps to go around right now. And that is actually quite daunting. That's tough.
We're going to definitely dig into that. Now, but before we get too far, though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. Are you ready?
Yeah,
All right.
I am.
I tend to think of today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. You know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. Because occasionally as an entrepreneur, I can envision myself flying around town, possibly with a cape and tights, using our products and services to save our customers, if you will. But also like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. For example, think about Spider-Man. There was a time where he was just a kid going to school, doing his thing. And he didn't really have a care in the world, taking some photos, trying to earn some pizza money. And then one day, something special happens to him, and you realize he's got special abilities, and now he gets to choose whether he's going to use them for good or for evil. So, my question to you, sir, is before your book, Topple, before your company, CapImpact, before working at IBM, before everything we know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Ralph Welborn?
Well, I wasn't bitten by a spider.
That's okay.
I was, however, working at a large consulting company, KPMG, and I ran global strategy for them as well. And I'll never forget. So my job there was, I had a lot of folks, I had a lot of projects all over the place, and I was privileged to work all over the place with this team. And yet, I'm a Seattle boy. And as a Seattle boy, we're like the salmon that go upstream. And at one point, I actually got tired of I called it feeding the beast, of just doing more and more of the same thing. And I got seduced by really hard problems. I'm like a moth to hard problems. And I remember there were a couple of clients that we had that frankly weren't making a lot of money for the firm, but the problems were so difficult that my boss said, look, we can't keep supporting, you personally can't keep supporting these because you have to keep feeding the beast. And I said, I'm so seduced by these problems, I quit. And I started my own firm just to work on these problems. And one of the problems dealt with the renewable energy space. One of them dealt with, I got pulled into dealing with cybercrime. And the reason I was pulled into those two, and there was a third one, but the reason I was pulled into these particular problems is they're hard. They're really, really hard problems. And there's a term of art called wicked problem. And so they're wicked problems. And a wicked problem is one that no one person or no one organization can deal with by themselves. So to make it really tangible, in the cyber attack, and we were being attacked by someone we didn't know, and there were a number of companies throughout the U.S., ones that we all know of. And the question was, how do you fight a network of bad guys with a network of good guys? And how do you get folks who come from this network of folks who are being attacked, how do you mobilize their behavior, get all of these guys from different industries to work together in a way to go tackle a common threat? How on earth do you do that? It's a hard problem. And the same issue with renewable energy, which is no one firm can tackle that. No one type of stakeholder can tackle that. It's an urgent issue. How do you mobilize the action of different stakeholders to go tackle that type of problem in a way that we can all make money from it, but also contributes to societal benefit? So that was sort of my origin story of how do we start looking at these problems in a fundamentally different way. And from then on, I've just never looked back.
Okay, I just want to point something out so that everybody hears it. You talk about these insanely hard problems and you smile.
Well, I think how many moths get burned by those flames.
I'm just like, okay.
I've been a little singed on my wings every now and then.
Okay. I mean, I'm glad somebody is out there smiling about it. Can't say that I've ever met someone who's like, yeah, this is hard. It's great. But I'm glad that that's there. So take us on this journey. How did this love affair of difficult, or what you called wicked
You're
problems?
saying, what the heck?
Yes, help us.
Say what?
Yeah, there's more to this than meets the eye, because we got to understand that.
Yeah, so You know what's interesting is when we were dealing with those type of wicked problems, and that was a classic example of we had to figure out how we created both greater economic value, profit for the commercial entities, but because we were dealing with a number of public entities too, we had to contribute to citizen, they call it citizen benefit, I just call it societal value, whatever. We had to create win-win-win situations for everybody engaged. And so it was just a different model. And I said, all right, it's a different model, it's unique. What are you going to do? And then I ended up going to IBM, and it was astounding experience for me. And what happens, again, I've been dealing in this world of these big old mega problems. And I was working in Kenya, and I ran into just this incredible problem and it turned out it was the same principles and the questions of how do you tackle a problem in a fundamentally different way. And it was what we did in the commercial space here in Kenya is exactly the same as what I then started looking around the world and seeing was common to other explosive growth models. The issue, I remember years ago, my wife and I bought a green Subaru. And prior to that, I had never thought of a Subaru, certainly never looked for a green car from one. But the minute we drove off the road, you see green Subarus all over the place. Have you ever had that experience?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right? So things that were unseen before all of a sudden are everywhere. And so what happened is I worked with this entrepreneur in Kenya, and so here's the use case. The use case was I'm a father of a family on say it's a Tuesday, and I can't buy food for my family until Friday. What am I going to do? That was the problem we tackled. And running strategy for the Middle East and Africa, I was privileged enough to be able to work with two different type of companies. One was a bank, and one was this entrepreneur. And for the bank, we did it the typical way that many people address strategy and growth. And what we did is we said, all right, the problem is an issue of how do we get cheap loans, micro loans, down to this father. And so what we did, we looked at the value chain, we looked at what was going on, we looked at how can we cut cost, how can we optimize what we were doing in each stage of the value chain, and then we took cost out, we repackaged the loan, and we delivered it to them. And in 6 months, we were selling approximately $1,500 a week. Not bad. With Julian, we did something fundamentally different. And this was starting to be the shift from what I did before to insight into what was going on. And what we did with Julian is we said, all right, same problem. I'm an entrepreneur. What are the capabilities that I need to tackle that problem? Well, one of the things I needed to do, of course, was figure out which store I could go to and where I didn't have any money to buy something. Another capability, I need a mechanism of exchange. Not necessarily money, because he has no money, but a mechanism of exchange. And we said, well, what is that? And we realized that in Africa, there are 1.2 phones per person. So we said, hey, what's a mechanism of exchange on every one of our cell phones around the planet? Any idea?
I was going to, no.
Mobile minutes.
Oh.
Yeah, right? Think of Venmo.
Yeah.
Right? Venmo is a mechanism by which you can pass cash to your friends over time. So for us, it was mobile minutes. Now, Julian was not a telco, right? He wasn't a telecommunications company. So we had to go to the CEO of one of the large telecommunication firms, and we said, hey, we would love to have access to your mobile minutes in your pipes, basically. So why on earth? I mean, this goes back to the question of renewable energy and the cyber again. How do you mobilize the behavior of different stakeholders around a common problem? Change common problem for new sources of value. We're starting to make the shift towards the commercial world. CEO of this telco says, well, why would I do that? Well, it's interesting. Here's where it starts to get really interesting. Every telecommunication firm on the planet faces a problem. And the problem is known as the JAWS chart. And the JAWS chart simply means that they get most of their money through voice lines. They really want to get money through the data lines. Those lines are at they're separated from each other. And that's known as the JAWS, right? The JAWS opening. And what you want to do is close that line. So basically, every telecommunication firm wants more data through the pipes, but they don't know how to get that. Julian was offering them a way to get that. So he says, all right, I'll give you access to this asset that I happen to have, and so on. So we walked around and said, what are the capabilities we need to solve this problem? We went to the various other actors who had them and said, hey, what if I orchestrate these capabilities that will give you value and give me value? And in that process, we will solve this problem in a unique way. And that was the experiment. After 6 months, Julian was able to deliver 1,500 of these products a day as opposed to per week. And then over the next month, he just grew exponentially over everyone. And that was the seed of saying, this is interesting. There's something different here whereby we can grow 6 times faster than the traditional industry. What's going on here? So it was like that driving the green Subaru off the lot, where we had a new lens. I had a new lens to start looking for, is there something common to these explosive growth companies? Forget about in Africa, but not only in Africa, but elsewhere around the world. So at that point, I started reaching out and engaging with entrepreneurs, small companies, large companies, startups, investors, whatever else, about what are some, is there this new business model? What is common to this business model? And what are the 4 lessons or some of the lessons that we can pragmatically learn from them to figure out what the heck is going on in this changed world? If you believe there really was one. Now, look, this was years ago. So over time, I just started to be very sensitive to this, started working with a number of these folks around the world. And for goodness sakes, there is this model that exists. And the book is sharing the models and what are the 4 pragmatic lessons. But that's sort of the origin story of what I've been playing with.
So when it comes down to it, what would you say, like for those who are listening, what would be an example of a company that we would all know that has adopted this model that you're talking about?
Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflowdiary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/cashflowdiary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflowdiary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, Uber, Airbnb, and those are just the ones that we all know about. There are dozens, hundreds of other companies, much smaller ones, who are figuring out this rules of the game about how do you play fundamentally differently. So aside from talking theoretically for a second, let me get really pragmatic about one of the lessons, because it's a way that starts to draw people in to make this really, really pragmatic, is for all firms. I mean, look, all firms out there today are successful by definition because we're here. They solve a need. Good. However, I passionately believe that many, many, many businesses are optimized for a world that no longer exists. What worked before just ain't going to work tomorrow. And here's where it starts to get really interesting. For just about every firm, there are about 20% of capabilities. And by capabilities, I mean skill sets or technology assets that drive over 70% of the value that you deliver, that have made you successful to date. So logically, if the world changes, then the 20% of capabilities that made you successful today will not be the 20% that you need tomorrow. So the question becomes, what is that new 20% you're going to need to capture new sources of value tomorrow? Let me make it really, really pragmatic with an example. I was working with an insurance company. It's written up in the book, but a little while ago. And we were having this conversation of the new 20%. I was with the executive team for a day. and they got it. And the purpose of the session was, what are the lessons of the new growth companies out there, and how can we use those to stress test how you're thinking about your growth and what you're doing? And we were playing with this idea of the new 20%. And this guy got it, and he pounded the table, and he said, I get it. He started walking around the room, and he said, I'm an insurance company. He said, insurance company is all about how we price risk. It's our book of risk. All of about 20% of capabilities, the core capabilities that drive the majority of our value, is protecting our book of risk, right? He said, what happens? This is one of those aha moments. He said, what happens in a world where the value we need to deliver is not about pricing risk, but it's about preventing accidents? The capabilities you need to prevent accidents are different than the one you need to price risk. And that was one of those huge aha moments. I mean, what do you need to prevent accidents? You need telemetry data. Yes, you're going to need your actuarial data and risk, but you need another whole new set of capabilities: telemetry data, instant messaging, instant access about what's going on. You need a whole other set of capabilities that you never had before. To be relevant, that's what you've got to have. And so one of the lessons here is that we are increasingly competing in a world without sectors, right? And we know that. We've all been hearing about it. So remember a couple of years ago up in Detroit, I love this example, and I seldom use universals like all and every, but in this case, every CEO from the automobile industry stood up and said, we are no longer car and truck companies. I don't know if you remember this. I love this. But they said, we are all mobility companies. And initially, everyone just kind of giggled at that. They're funny articles that came out after that. You're a mobility company, not an automobile company. What are you talking about? Well, it actually was very insightful. Take a look at connected cars. Take a look at what the real value of the cars that are the Tesla. People talk about the Tesla car as not as a car, but what is a iPhone on wheels. And right, and the insight of that was, hey, it's really about data, and it's really about how do we engage people easier and provide real-time insight and information to look at all these new devices inside our cars to make the driving experience easier. So here you had executives saying, hey, we have to get outside of our traditional boundaries. We're a mobility company, but we know we don't have all the capabilities we need in the automobile industry. There are capabilities in other industries we have to take advantage of. There's a new 20% we have to deal with, which is why the flurry of investment over the past couple of years has been in tech companies, data analytics companies, and so on for the automobile industries. And not just in terms of partnerships, different type of partnerships, but actually tying in shared revenue, shared risk models, really orchestrating the capabilities from different actors in service of delivering new type of value to customers. That is the essence of these new models that we're seeing.
When you're talking, it feels like, and again, I come from a real estate bias. In order to get a real estate transaction done, any real estate transaction done, I may call myself a buy and hold long-term landlord or investor, but in order to deliver that service, the number of people we have to interface with and parties we have to get on the same page is insane. And it just sounds I'm not trying to make it simple, but it sounds like to me what you're saying is that the same thing is happening for other industries now, where they can't just focus on their own little home.
Correct. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. Absolutely. And actually, just one of those things, it's all new things come. What is that? All new things come back, or whatever that nice phrase is. So 17th century Europe, the early banks were this. The early banks weren't simply transaction of money. They were transportation. They were real estate. They were financial. They were whatever else. And then we developed these over several hundred years, these nice SIC codes, industry-based codes. And so competition has always been, how do I look at my peer group? How am I doing relative to them? But what we're seeing, again, is that the topple rate at which companies are falling from their competitive position is accelerating dramatically. And so the folks that were on 80% of the companies that were on the Fortune 50, 500 20 years ago are gone. They're not on there anymore. And that rate is accelerating, and again, we talked earlier about the concentration of economic profit getting bigger and bigger. And if you look at characteristics of them, they are of those companies that have this blended, they orchestrate these capabilities like you in the real estate do. Here's where it starts to get slightly different, perhaps, is, look, we've always had partnerships with other firms. But think about Uber, and I'll tie it back together in a minute. But think about Uber, for example. Uber doesn't own any of its assets, right? Its core value is the orchestration of assets, banking, access to your banking accounts, taxis, helicopters, whatever else it happens to be, right? Spaceship soon, space war soon, right? Rocket ship coming to you.
Can't wait to order my helicopter, I promise.
Okay, I'll go with drones right now, but right. So they orchestrate these assets and service of, and what their 20%, their value they add is a software that actually does that orchestration. Now, fine, posit that, because that's an example of the model, and like you say, the real estate model. So for these ecosystems, right? That's what I call these ecosystem-centric models. Yucky term, but there you have it. It's not simply an issue of yes, I have to orchestrate relationships with a bunch of other folks, but there is data that gets spun off as a result of that exists as a result of that, or new services that can be delivered as a result of that. And it's the monetization of those extra services or data that starts to give even more value to the other partners. So the fact that every partner that you work with gets what they want by I don't know real estate, but I'd certainly know other of these areas, by giving you services, if there's an additional revenue stream that can be created, that's incredible. So let me give an example. CPG company, consumer product company, a brand that we all know, and many of us wear, certainly our kids wear. And they were facing a challenge of I'm only growing a little bit under what the industry is growing globally. I need to change that. Market cap is coming down a little bit. I've got to do something different. Two approaches you can take to that. There's one approach to it, which I call the Red Queen strategy. And the Red Queen is that character from Alice in Wonderland that you may recall.
Yeah, when you said it, I was like, you're going to cut off some heads? All right, keep going.
So she's known for that, yes. But she's also known for running faster and faster, but staying in the same place.
Got it.
And I find you're very apt for a lot of businesses who are so focused on what they have to do that they run faster and faster, but they tend to invest in the new shiny objects out there, whether it's Internet of Things or AI or innovation or digital, whatever it happens to be. They're chasing the shiny objects. But the problem is,
Ralph, those shiny objects, they keep calling to me, man. They're awesome.
I know. Well, you remember that movie? I forget what movie it is, with the animated dog, Squirrel. Right, it's that thing. It's
Up is the movie. Up.
Yeah,
I know.
It's the best. It's the best, right?
Exactly.
One of the best scenes. And so, yeah, they do call you to you, but that's what gives rise to a couple of things. It gives rise to investing a lot like everybody else is doing. So logically, how are you possibly going to be different from anybody else? It also is what is contributing to this increasing concentration wealth by the few. It's also, which is why these new business models are coming in place to actually kind of break out of the Red Queen approach. So let me go back. So the Red Queen strategy for this particular firm is, logically enough, go invest in Brazil, go invest in China and Saudi Arabia where the appropriate demographics are. Completely makes sense. And we're all going to be looking for the next market to go into with the existing, this is the key, the existing and products and services we have. That's a Red Queen strategy because everyone's going to be going after that. And we know that trying to out-execute everybody, as we all remember our 8th grade history, is not a sustainable model to keep growing, because what happens to heroes in Greek history, remember?
Well, they die a lot.
They die, right? So it's just not a good model. So the question was, all right, let's redefine the question differently, the challenge differently. It's not an issue of how do we grow more with our existing set of products and services. But what is the problem that we're trying to solve from a customer's point of view? Because customers, frankly, don't care about our products. They care about what the products allow them to do. And so if we get insight in terms of what it is that customers, what are the friction points where they spend their time and money, and then we figure out how our products and services fit into that, is there value? Let me take it back to this apparel company. So we started talking to a number of their customers, a number of whom were musicians. I'll just pick on this group. And, there are approximately 800 million amateur musicians in the world. And we talked to all of them. Took a while. I'm kidding. But we talked to a number of them, and we said a number of these amateur musicians had a problem. There was a friction. And we always know that explosive growth comes from tackling friction, right? So as business guys, we're always looking for how do we eliminate friction. So we were talking to these musicians about, hey, what are the challenges that you've got? What would you like to have as a musician? Note, this has nothing to do with the core products that this company was delivering. These happen to be a number of their core customers or customers they wanted to have. And I'll never forget this one guy in San Diego who said, I'm a trumpet player. I'm a jazz trumpet player, and I would love to learn more about Ghanaian drumming. And I can go on the website and I can do it, but I would really love to be able to play with the Ghanaian drummer. I'd love to be able to find one. I'd love to be able to play with one. That's hard to do at that point in time. And we kept hearing this issue about, I would love to learn more about. I would love to find I would love to engage with. We kept hearing those things over and over again. And not only with across the board in for the music segment. And so we said, there's a real friction point here around finda. We called it finda, matcha, engager. And so you know what we did? And said that's what we kept hearing over, and those were the friction points. And so we created a digital sound studio. And the digital sound studio allowed musicians to simply engage. So think of it. I as a company have a set of hard products that I sell. I built on top of that a set of services that allowed people to find musicians, to engage with them, to play with them digitally. And that solved that friction of finda, matcha, engager. What has been the result of that? The result of that is that this company now, after 2.5 years, is driving 3x industry growth, net new revenue stream, because the revenue stream that this spits off is not only greater pull-through for their core products, but also the type of insight they have in terms of what their consumers, where and how they're spending their time is massive. And they're monetizing that data stream as well, which then is giving suggestions about what other type of new products and services could they deliver. And so there's a difference about engaging with partners you have, which is always critical in real estate. You've got to, I get it, many more than others. The question with this model is what other capabilities can you orchestrate around with folks in other industries, number one. And number two, of course, they're going to have to get the economic benefits they want. But in addition, are there new revenue streams that can be created and shared among all of you? And that's an example of this apparel company that I mentioned. And that's an example of these new type of models we're seeing. Whether you're Uber, whether you're Hotels.com, whether you're Amazon or whatever.
Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about, again, selfishly, but for everyone's example, I'm thinking about my own business. As I continue to run our portfolio of short-term rentals, we've started to morph, because when our customers come, they give us obviously a significant amount of data, where they're going, restaurants they're going to, why they're in town, all of these things, to the point to where I feel like I could actually start, if I wanted to become a real estate broker and like just start selling homes, I could probably do that, because we have enough people who leverage our core product to, as they're transitioning to their permanent residence, and then, or their in between residences, or we have enough people who are coming for medical reasons to be able to assist doctors. Well, I don't know. I think that's what you're saying, though.
It's 100% what I'm saying. 100%. The question is 100%. The question is, where are the friction? Again, customers don't care about your products. I mean, of course they do, right? I'm just doing this to make a point. They care about what it enables them to do. So the question becomes, what are the points of friction that people have in terms of where they spend their time, their money, their resources? And then you look at the value chain associated with those areas, like with music. Now, look, this company couldn't tackle all of the value chain in music. That would be silly, absolutely silly.
Right.
So what? Right? It'd be silly. And so what we looked at it is we looked at the value chain of music and maker movement and entertainment, and we said, look, there are a couple of areas of points of friction for our customer. Find a, match a, engage a. That was the same whether it was music, whether it was entertainment, whether it was food and lodging. And we said, there's something common there. Let's go build a service around that and then redesign our products and extend our products and services and create new ones that drives more of what we currently have and pushes us to make us essential into really how our customers are living their lives. And so it's exactly what you're saying. So if you picked off the problem of, you mentioned healthcare or eating out, for example, and you would go leverage the data streams from a TripAdvisor or whatever. I'm not sure. Or you could play with this easily. That would say, what are those friction points out there that I can build as a layer or a new set of services to support that problem that will pull through more I currently have. We are all, as consumers, we ain't got enough time to do anything, right? We don't have time. So the question of anything that can reduce those points of friction. Now, the beauty of this, and this is the difference between the existing strategy approach and this new strategy approach. I call it plant a flag on a problem. The typical Red Queen strategic approach is, how do I sell more of what I currently have based on the capability set that I've got today and has made me successful up to today? Get me 5%, 8% more of what I do today. Great. Keep doing that. You're running the Red Queen race. If you turn it around and say, where's value being created and destroyed in the areas in the environment in which my customers are engaged? I call it the ecosystem in which my customers are engaged. Figure that out. Like the find a, engage a, match a, and then figure out, all right, this is where I'm going to plant my flag. I'm going to solve this problem for the consumer. And then, and only then, do you say, now, what products and services do I have to support that? Oh, I don't have everything I need. I need these capabilities from telco, from pharma, from wherever, right? I was using the example of the Kenya thing, the example of Uber, the example of Amazon, on and on and on and on. So you start with, where do I plant my flag around what problem am I going to solve? Then and only then, what products and services do I have? What additional capabilities do I need? Can I build those capabilities? Do I partner with them? What do I do about those? That is different. It is different. Yeah. And then it gets to really interesting questions about how do you do that? But that's a different approach.
Got it. Now, and it's funny how these lessons from, we'll say, larger organizations can actually still apply to a smaller one. And
100%. And I actually think with the smaller ones, that's another really interesting thing that I'm seeing. And I get asked this a lot. I work with a lot of small companies, and I love it. Because the agility and the ability to say, hey, I can actually become essential to these larger ecosystems of friction or opportunity. It's crazy. I was working with a very, very, very large airline, and they were doing this exercise of what's our new 20%. And previously, these guys have been written up a lot in terms of they're incredible about how they manage their thousands and thousands of suppliers. It's the orchestration of their logistics, which is what delivers tremendous value. But when you actually looked at what's going on, you see that what really drives the value of them is their ability, of course, to get the plane up and the plane down, right? Kind of important. And then when you say, well, all right, well, what gets a plane up? What gets a plane down? And you find out that, well, interestingly, there's a lot of software involved in getting a plane up and a plane down. And then you look at the number of lines of code and the type of functionality involved. And then you find out that there's actually a very small piece of code that deals with what's known as APIs, application, basically the software that makes other software play nice.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get a plane up and a plane down. Well, it just so happened that this small piece of code was written by one of their partners, not theirs, which means that the tremendous value of this firm getting a plane up and a plane down was by this tiny little firm that only wrote a couple lines of code, a little more than a couple, but small amount. That's interesting, which means that whole friggin' multi-billion-dollar industry rested on a small company that decided to tackle a very specific, very hard problem. Isn't that interesting?
That is, yeah.
I love that.
That is indeed.
So that's why.
And thing.
That's
Go ahead.
why.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. That's why I get so excited by this stuff, right? Working with small companies. So for me, again, Red Queen strategies are based on what we talked about. But the traditional approach on Red Queen strategies is, how do I sell more of what I've currently got? If you believe that we lived in a changed competitive environment, then it logically follows that a changed competitive environment requires a new strategic question. And that's the whole starting point. And the new question is, where's value being created and destroyed in the ecosystem in which I and my customers are engaged? And what the heck are we going to do about it?
Indeed.
And from there, everything follows. And so the opportunities for small firms are enormous. The opportunities for place your money differently in firms that understand this, enormous.
Indeed. Now, for those that have listened this far and are enjoying the topic, want to find out more, what's going to be the best way for them to track you down online, or maybe even grab a copy of your book?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. It's at a lot of Barnes and Nobles, but Amazon is very easy. You can get me through www.topplebook.com. My email is in there, and I'd love to talk to people about this stuff.
Good. Now, with that being said, as we wind down here, I've got a final question for you because I'm kind of interested to hear what you have to say. Let's pretend that someone listening is, standing on what I like to call the precipice of decision, and they've decided that, you know what, I'm going to tackle a big problem. I'm going to be in business. I'm going to make my business better. I'm going to do some of this stuff. I'm going to implement and make things happen. And maybe they're even standing in front of what I like to call the superhero outfit store. They are ready to pick their cape and tights and go do this thing. Now, like I know, that when we get to these moments of decisions, Ralph, what happens is that we have a companion, and that companion often comes in the form of a voice, and it reminds us of what we're not, who we're not, how it didn't work last time, and, well, for some people, they're actually related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different. In the next 24 to 48 hours, they're actually going to follow through and do what you say. What would you suggest that they do?
I would suggest that they ask the one question, not the theoretical question that I asked before that has really impact, but a ridiculously pragmatic question that has gotten a lot of people, a visceral question, which is, what is our new 20% going to be to capture 85% of economic profit tomorrow? That is such a visceral question. The other thing I would recommend is that everyone go watch the movie, great movie, that indie movie from 20 years ago, The Gods Must Be Crazy. In that movie, there's a line that has kept me going for a long time. And the line is, things that yesterday were unknown have today become a necessity. And I believe that our competitive landscape over the next 10 years, we will not be talking about how are we doing, how are we competing against our peers, but it's going to be how are we engaged within the various ecosystems that exist.
Wow. I like both of those things right there. So, and let me be the first to say that we appreciate the work that you're doing, and you're bringing this and making it accessible to so many people on a level who would never honestly have access to it. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, as well as your insight here with us today at the CashFlow Diary.
Oh, thanks. It was fun. Love the laughter.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means get over to ToppleBook.com. Why? Because you know that you just learned a lot. In fact, you probably begun to see opportunity for your business, your industry, and well, the best way to do it is to go grab the book, ToppleBook.com. But more importantly than that, do something. Ask yourself those questions, because your new 20%, well, it's waiting for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.